So we're going to begin reading the Dhammapada starting on verse 21. And I'm not going to put it up on the screen. Is that okay for everybody online? You can look it up if you want on Sutta Central, but we're using, and on Sutta Central you might see the translation. I think the translation of Acharya Buddharakkhita is also on Sutta Central. So if anybody has trouble finding it, please let me know. We'll give you some guidance. Okay, just shout, raise your hand, if you have any problems. Okay, so this is the section on apamada, or heedfulness. We're going to talk about that word a little bit. Would you read the Pali?
Yeah, okay. So this is the Appamada Vagga, and then Appamado Amata Padam, Pamado Machuno Padam, Appamata Nami Yanti, Ye Pamatta Yatamata.
Thank you. And the English is, heedfulness is the path to the deathless. Heedlessness is the path to death. The heedful do not die. The heedless are already dead. You like that translation, Venerable?
Yeah, I don't really know what to make of this pamada in English. Pamada, this heedfulness, or yeah, it's a bit unclear. But I don't know. I mean, I don't have a better option. But I know that there is no consensus over this translation as being, yeah.
So I had a discussion one time with a group that we were teaching the Dharma punks down in San Jose about this particular. We're fighting to get rid of the screen, clearly. But this word brings up some feelings for some people, given their conditioning, and I don't know if that's for any of us here right now, but heedfulness has kind of being heedful, or if you're not heedful, you might be going to a bad place, kind of idea. And I guess we might see some of that in here. But that discussion, I think, to really be sensitive to, or maybe more just aware of how these words that in English strike us. To really try to get a sense of how this word apamada is used in the canon, in the suttas, to see if it really has the same effect on our heart as heedfulness does. And one thing we could say, care or being conscientious, just being circumspect about how we behave and speak, and paying attention. I think all of these things kind of come into heedfulness or apamada.
How is it defined in the Pali?
Look that up on
What are the synonyms?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not 100% sure about the etymology. That's why I was looking it up. Just give me a second. So, I have a sense that, I might be just, talking some nonsense here, but I think it comes from the same root as the English madness, being mad.
Mm.
Yeah, I think rather the English madness probably comes to a root cognate to what we have in Pali, but I just need to look it up for a moment, so maybe we can carry on.
You mean madness like someone who's crazy?
Yeah.
Wow, really?
Madness.
Okay. So
Well,
this is the verse.
I do remember hearing that Ajahn Chah once said, if you're not heedful, you're crazy. You might as well be crazy.
Yeah, and he might have said mindfulness there, but it's the same kind of idea. So I think he was talking about sati.
Yeah, maybe.
When we're not, a moment of without mindfulness is a moment of craziness.
Yes.
Yeah.
The English dictionary defines heedful as aware of and attentive to. Does that fit at all?
Yeah, so could you read the one I have from the new Pali?
It says
Or concise?
the definition is
Yeah.
alertness, care, carefulness, caution, vigilance, diligence, conscientiousness, and heedfulness.
So lots of sort of synonyms there to give us some, and maybe that's part of the no one agrees on what it actually means. Yeah.
Is it to do with the precepts, though, in the end? At the end of the day, do you think it has to do with adhering to the precepts?
Certainly being cautious and careful around the precepts, but I think it goes quite a bit deeper than that as well. Just like if you really look at Sila deeply, which we're going to be doing later this year for a couple of months, putting a lot of attention on Sila, then you see how deep it runs. You know, it starts with 5 precepts and maybe, you know, adding a little more, what do I want to say, a little more to those with celibacy maybe sometimes, or forever, like in our case. Or, you know, the 10 wholesome or unwholesome things, and, you know, you just get, you know, you get more and more refined as you look at Sila. And I think this heedfulness or conscientious attitude and paying attention applies in all of those cases.
Yeah, it does have something to do with madness and also, you know, with intoxication, etc. But yeah, but I really don't know what the primary, like, you know, verbal root is. So it's kind of, yeah. I mean, I cannot. I mean, I would really need to look it up. I didn't do my homework. I'm sorry. Yeah, before coming. But yeah, it has to do with intoxication. You know, it's also found in this training rule, like not to. I mean, to abstain from substances leading to intoxication or intoxicants. So that's the same word that's featured there.
Because you become very heedless when we become intoxicated. And the Buddha used that intoxication around youth, health, wealth, you know, all of these kinds of things that we can be, you know, thinking we've got the world by the tail when we're actually operating within a very fragile body and mind conditioning. So heedfulness or conscientiousness really benefits us. We really pay attention and recognize that things could change any nanosecond, you know. So in the conversation I was referring to earlier, one thing that came out that I found interesting was a sense that this also implies a certain, and I don't know if it really implies this from the word, but as we discussed what this means and how it works, it can also, I think, imply a care or an anticipation of what the consequences might be to do a certain action. So, like, you're aware of this, you know, what you're doing, and you kind of have a sense of how it could result in some kind of adverse result. And that's really, you know, like mindfulness and clear comprehension also are, you know, around this kind of thing where you really have, you're not just aware of the present moment, but you're aware of the kinds of consequences that a certain action could bring. I think it's interesting. Yes, Daniel? Go ahead.
I'm just wondering, what is the Pali for clear comprehension, and is there any relation to this?
It's sampajanya. So sati and sampajanya are often paired, you know, because it's not just about paying attention, it's about paying attention with some sense of wisdom involved. So there is some idea of that. Is there any connection between Dhammapada and sampajanya?
No.
So with intoxication, you would think also maybe being out of control.
Yeah. Yeah, this word would Dhammapada would definitely have that idea of being. I mean, obviously, being in control has different levels. I mean, we can't control very much, but we can control our speech and our actions, and if we train the mind, even our thoughts. So when we're out of control, we're just creating all kinds of problems usually.
And if we're heedless, we are out of control, even if they're not big out of control moments or emotions. You're not paying attention to what's really going on, so you're not going to you're out of control even a little bit. You know, you're not evaluating the present correctly.
Kind of goes back to that madness,
Yeah.
root of madness. So it's the path to the death. So heedfulness, being heedful, being conscientious, and aware in this way is the path to the deathless. So this is essential to our awakening. What you say?
Yeah, is everybody familiar with this, attribute of Nibbana as the deathless, Amarta? You haven't heard it, or maybe everybody else can.
Well, I think what we're familiar with it, I'm familiar with it more from the hippy-dippy days. But actually, I'd like to hear a little bit more about it because we think, oh, this is the kind of the end of rebirth, the rebirth process. But can you say some more about it?
Yeah, I mean, just briefly. So deathless doesn't mean immortal. So it's known, without death. So from a Buddhist perspective, this being deathless is about being without birth. So once you attain the end of birth, you are also, free from death. So you're not becoming immortal, or you're not aiming for immortality or for anything like that. You're rather aiming for the opposite of immortality. I mean, for not taking birth again. And so they are like a byproduct of each other in a way. This kind of transcending birth and no longer being subject to death. But it doesn't mean that one doesn't die in the present lifetime, of course. It's like more about the being enslaved by death, or like overcoming the fear of death. And
so once you're born, you're working on the deathless for the next round.
Right.
Or also for this round, because you are also afraid of death in this lifetime.
Yeah, but in a sense of no rebirth. It's already, if you're born, it's already happened.
Yeah.
That's taken care of.
The body will go through the dying process no matter what we do.
Yeah.
Once we're born.
But it's that like once returner, non-returner kind of status.
Well, yeah, maybe you'll come back one more time or whatever, or not, and realize Nibbana there in the heaven realms. But I think the main point is you overcome death, even in the lifetime when you're a human being and the body will die. You're no longer identified with that. It's no problem. It's like, sure. One of the things that came out in our guided meditation this morning was that this body is just on loan to us, or it's a borrowed vehicle. So somebody wrote in the WhatsApp chat, yeah, my hurts. The borrowed vehicle from Hertz Rental Company. And, it's just kind of that idea that we accept that, we know that, but we don't have to be concerned about it at all once we realize the deathless or realize Nibbana, because we see the truth of things, right? So,
basically, when you realize Nibbana, you realize the non-becoming. So there is a direct experience of non-birth, because you are giving up the craving for becoming something else. So that direct experience of Nibbana is a direct experience of the deathless at each stage of awakening, precisely because you are kind of giving up the craving for existence, or the craving for more experience to arise. And with the extinction of this craving, which is another way of saying Nibbana or cessation or Nirodha, then comes this direct experience of the lack of birth and of the deathless at the same time. So that's where this idea comes from, really, that there is no birth because there is no longer craving for becoming. So like craving for more experience, or wanting to suppress presently arisen experience. I mean, craving is not just positive craving for, but it's also like craving to suppress whatever is presently arisen. So it's kind of, I mean, I think it's important to always, bring in the fact that craving is craving for becoming, but also craving for annihilation. It's kind of not just craving for existence, but also craving for non-existence.
Yeah, bhavatanha and vibhavatanha. Along with kama tanha, those are the roots of dukkha for us. And it's really so important to recognize that, and then to reflect on, when I want something, or when I want to experience something, that is what's there. Either way, wanting it or wanting to get rid of it, or wanting to experience something from the senses, right? Just imagine what it might be like to be without that desire to experience. Because what is it that makes us want to continue to come back and live again? We want to do, we want to be, we want to feel, we want to experience. So it really takes a powerful insight that results from the development of the Noble Eightfold Path to really realize I don't want. But it's also like not pushing away. It's just the realization that leaves us completely balanced and without desire, without attachment, without any clinging, craving. So it says, this idea of this heedfulness or carefulness is the path to the deathless. It's not the deathless itself, but we need this kind of attitude, this kind of quality, woven into our experience, so we can see when it is we really are wanting something, when we are wanting to become something. Today we're also talking about how often in our practice we want to get something. I want samadhi, I want jhana, I want to be an arahant. But if it comes from that place of the personality, that wanting something, it's really super limiting. It doesn't really open us up to the point of being able to experience what we haven't yet experienced, or to know what we don't yet know. But if we can observe that wanting by taking the position of witnessing our experience, then we have an opportunity to let that awareness actually observe and see through it. See, what do I expect to gain from that? Or maybe it goes deeper than that. Like, what is it like when I let go? How does it feel? What if I sit down to meditate, just relax? Maybe I can follow the technique that I've learned and just let that kind of flow in a natural way and not try to do anything. Just stay present and see what happens.
It's really hard to turn off the voice in the back of the head saying, "No, you're being lazy. You're not really meditating. You're faking it."
Yeah, the critic.
Yeah.
That's for many of us so deeply conditioned that voice is constantly, like pushing us. But it actually doesn't work, does it? When that energy is there, maybe you've had the experience, as many people have, of having some pleasant, positive experience in meditation, and then later just trying to reach that again. Well, whenever we try to do that, and I've noticed in my own life, even experiences that don't have nothing to do with meditation, but they're very pleasant, somehow trying to create that, it never works. It's because that experience didn't come from efforts to try to create it. It came from whatever the causes and conditions were that allowed us to naturally kind of experience what we experience. So the recreation of it is a totally different activity that doesn't really lead to the same place, understandably, right? So it's really this is so much about investigating and reflecting on what we're experiencing, and to be able to have this quality of appamada. I actually like learning the Pali. This is a Pali scholar. This is not. but the vocabulary is very intriguing because it's precisely pointing at things that we don't really have specific words for.
Yeah, maybe I was just thinking one way could be clear-headedness, because this kind of terminology also occurs in that exhortation, like appamadena sampadeta, so apply yourself with appamada. Appamadena, it's an instrumental form which basically indicates in that way, through that way. I mean, this is the function of that particular kind of form. So I think clear-headedness is kind of also bypassing this kind of normative idea. I'm lazy, I'm not lazy, I should be lazy. Because if I know what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, I mean, I don't have to, be like be imposing this practice on myself. It's like, I'm either ignorant or I am clear-headed. So if I know what this is for, I want to do it. If I have to force myself, it just means I haven't got it. I mean, it's like I am still samsara is beautiful. I mean, I think there is a nuance there of like knowing why you are on this path, and recognizing that you have to have clarity and kind of uprightness in a way. So it's kind of I think it's nice. It's clear-headedness maybe.
And then this part where the heedful do not die, but the heedless are already dead. Interesting. It's as if we're already dead. I've also seen a translation that puts in that as if we're already dead. I'm going to get the real scoop here in a second, but it's I like these passages in the canon, in the suttas, where the Buddha talks about, I myself am subject to dying. I'm going to die someday. Why do I keep searching for and trying to acquire other things that are going to die? Why am I so caught up in this, basically a quest for death? And of course, we don't live in that reality. We're not aware of that most of the time in our life. We're constantly trying to acquire. We're conditioned to acquire. We're told, if you go to school, get good grades, go to a good university, get a good job, climb to the top, all the things we're supposed to do. But it's always going after things that will eventually disintegrate, disappear, and die. Even our, whatever, master's degrees, PhDs, is long in the past. We couldn't perform up to that standard now. It's not really part of our present reality. It all falls away. You can perform up to that standard. You're still practicing it.
No, I don't. That's why I can't remember the etymology of pamada. Yeah.
So it's interesting that, it's as if we're already dead, because we keep on going after that which is dead, that which is actually not going to continue and not going to really satisfy.
Well, if you live long enough, like I have, the body falls apart.
Mm-hmm. Old age is no fun, I hear. I'm on the brink, right? I don't know, what is old age these days? But, yeah. You seem to be doing pretty well, but we all know where this is headed, no matter how old we are.
If we're lucky, that's where it's headed.
I don't know, it's debatable, no? My dad died suddenly at 69, and it was a shock to everybody who was left behind, and it's hard to absorb that shock. But even then, I thought, he was not the type to really want that old age process. I think in some ways for him, it was a real simplification that bypassed a lot of trouble. And his own father was still alive, my grandpa, in the nursing home. My dad visited him every day, shaved him, made sure he had his sweater on, And he lasted another few years in his mid-90s. And it's like, I know my father would not have liked having to go through that. So I'm not sure if we're lucky or not. I guess it's like everything else. You just don't know. Anybody want to say anything more about this verse? Yes, Allison?
I really love that the heedless are already dead. But for me, also, when I first read it, it was kind of like, they're just not awake and aware of what's going on around them. They don't see the truth. They're just sleepwalking, or they're just not, they don't see what's happening, So they're just closed off to everything. I mean, it was such a strong thing. It was like, well, this is kind of judgmental, but it was like, but it was true. It's so true.
Yeah.
I liked it a lot.
Yeah. Well, it's a good one to encourage our appamada. Okay, let's go to 22.
Okay. Etam visisato nyatva appamadam hi pandisha appamade pamodanti aryanam gochare ratam.
It's beautiful. Clearly understanding this excellence of heedfulness. The wise exult therein and enjoy the resort of the noble ones.
Next.
I want to go to that resort.
It's vacation there, huh? Yeah. Well, I think it's certainly pointing to letting it sink in deeply. Do we really understand the importance of this? And enjoying I don't know, what is the word for resort here?
Gochara. Yeah. Gochara. Which means like the field or pasture. It's like you walk where the cow walks around, and so this is like the gochara. It's like your domain.
Nice. Yeah. So the domain of the noble ones for them. Yeah, so what does that look like? How much of the time do we live there or spend time there? So the noble ones, if you read the suttas, there are many references where the Buddha talks about what it is to be a noble disciple, and then how it is that an untaught ordinary person behaves in contrast to that. And so, I can easily look at my own actions in the past as an untaught ordinary person, and I can see the difference. We don't have to get into whether or not I think I'm a noble one, but the point is that I can see the difference when there's heedfulness and when there's more understanding of the precepts and acting in ways that are more wholesome and just creating a lot less trouble for everybody. So, to start to want that more than we want the excitement or the, acquisitions of the life that isn't according to that way of thinking and being. And, a lot of people, when they come into the practice and they start to talk about how they're not spending as much time with the same people anymore because they're starting to want to be in this kind of environment with people who are keeping precepts and so even if whether or not if we're saying, okay, the noble ones are only the ones who are stream enters or, more up to arahantship or however we define that, okay. But we can just see this in our own practice and in the relationships that we have and how we interact with people and where we want to spend our time, and recognize that in that pasture where there are precepts and there's generosity and kindness and compassion, truthfulness, integrity, and it's not as exciting, it's not as intense. There aren't the really strong ups of, falling madly in love with your rose-colored glasses on, or going into the depths of despair. But you like it better, the smoother path.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the words that I use for this in the translation you have the wise exalt therein and enjoy the results. So this exalt is rendering pamodanti, which is the same root as mudita. You maybe are more familiar with this mudita, this sympathetic joy or rejoicing with others. But here is not so much, like altruistically meant. It's more like joy in general. And then this rata, it's another word for taking pleasure or delight. And maybe it also ties in with what kind of the underlying current to Carrie's question earlier. Sort of, if you tap in with this happiness in the practice, it's no longer I should do it because you're actually you're finding non kind of deadly pleasure in the practice, and so yeah, it's not this intensity of worldly pleasures, but it's a different on a different level. So maybe that's also like an entry point into this idea of having pamada, tapping into the enjoyment actually of the practice. When you're in that state, you're actually happy and it's a relief.
Does pamodanti have any relationship to pamoja?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same. It's all the same family.
Yeah. Yeah, pamoja and mudita. That's beautiful because it feels that way. Yeah. Pamoja is the word in this cascade of well-being, where, whether we're starting with faith or we're starting with virtue, then what naturally arises, well, in one case it's non-regret, but they come to this pamoja, this kind of joy. That's actually this kind of joy. It's the joy and the goodness, and mudita, the appreciative joy of the Brahmaviharas. It really is much more. I used to think of it as quite narrow, the way it had been, the way I understood it. Oftentimes people talk about mudita as something that counters jealousy. You want this person to have this good fortune even though you missed out on it or something, But it's so much broader than that. It's really about finding the joy and goodness anywhere, and really feeling it, just wow. It's like when people take precepts, I always have this rush, mudita. Yeah. Any comments on this one?
That's the same. And the next one is not the same.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't understand something.
Oh, I think it's the same. And this one here is this one. Okay.
Went too far.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Shall we move on?
Yeah.
Okay. So, te jhayino satatika nicchandalla parakkamapu santi diranibbānam yoga kemam manuttaram.
The wise ones, ever meditative and steadfastly persevering, experience nibbana, the incomparable freedom from bondage. So I think about this ever meditative and steadfastly persevering. And what comes into my mind is Ajahn Ganha talking about having sati, samadhi, and panya all the time. When it, makes me want to reflect on and observe, what kind of samadhi do you have all the time? Along with sati and panya. So sati is mindfulness. Samadhi, of course, is the collectedness of mind or stillness of mind. And, it's generally a state of meditative absorption. And then there's the panya, which is wisdom. And, we've already kind of looked at sati and sampajanya, you've got the mindfulness and wisdom. These are different words for wisdom. And or clear comprehension is a translation for sampajanya. And then it's like, okay, we've got this appamada, this heedfulness, or this clarity, this attention, and to kind of think in those terms of what's my felt experience when there's mindfulness, we're present, we're clear-minded, and there's a calm, and we're aware of the way things are, at least to some degree, that there's the wisdom there, and that this is informing our actions and our speech. What is it like? Because when we ask ourselves, or when we reflect on what this is like, it's much bigger than what we can describe. There's something we can know about such a way of being that really helps us, I think, it has a positive feedback loop into the brain, into our wiring, that then encourages more of that. Again, kind of on that theme of wanting to be in the same pasture with the noble ones.
Yeah. Yeah, you may not recognize this word pusanti nibbana. You are probably familiar with the word passa for contact, like sense-basis contact, or like physical contact. So this basically means that you touch nibbana, so you have direct contact with nibbana, and so it's interesting because actually, the same word which is used for the six sense bases, mind included as the six sense bases, which is passa of contact. So one passa, it touches things, or the senses touch things. Also, you can touch nibbana, so you can have the same, immediate direct contact with nibbana rather than with the mundane experience at the level of the 76 sense spaces.
But it's temporary, right? You have a touch and then you lose it. The Nibbana contact.
I don't think once you've touched it, you can lose it.
Oh, really? Ooh.
Of course, you are not immersed in that state, ongoingly, but it's not something that that is reversible. That experience, I mean, it's so transformative that it's not understood that it can be, like lost. It's the only thing you cannot lose. I mean, everything you cannot lose. I mean, you can lose everything else, but this realization.
I have a question. So that word yoga, kemam, so that sounds like the same yoga,
Yeah.
practice. Could you say a little bit about that word and what yoga means in this context?
Yeah. So yoga comes from the word yunjati, which means to yoke together, like you yoke again cows or animals. And so like yoking things means basically like a bondage, or like chaining things, chaining up. And kshemam in Sanskrit would be kshema, basically means it's kind of like I mean, I think the translation here is like freedom from, it's like a safe place basically. So it's like you are and this kind of word is in conversation with what the real state of kema, kshema was for non-Buddhist practitioners. So now they are saying, I mean, this verse is saying that nibbana is actually yoga kemam, so it's the supreme safety or safe place or freedom from the bondage of samsara.
Okay.
So it's not yoga as a practice.
Yeah, in fact, it's this bond or yoke that you're actually wanting freedom from.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Thank you.
There's a question from Maybell online. Could you please say more about the deathless and the craving for not becoming? How do we want annihilation, and how is that different from working towards the last birth?
Would you like to say something?
Okay, I can try. Say more about the deathless and the craving for not becoming. I mean, of course, when we crave for not becoming, it's different from the. I really like the language of slanting, sloping, inclining towards nibbana, which has this natural. I'm on the slope to go to nibbana just so easy, right? It's not I want nibbana, nibbana now. That's the self again, So this desire to not become comes from the sense of self. It's not coming from this experience we're starting to feel into, which is the heedfulness and the joy and the freedom and the feeling of stability. There's samadhi and panya. It's not that. The desire for annihilation, the desire to not become again, has that pain in it. It's got that dukkha. It's self-induced. It's from the self, the sense of self, the sense of separate self. We all develop this by conditioning. We don't have a choice. This starts to form when we're small, and over lifetimes again and again. But it's like we're convinced that we are individual, separate human beings in this very dangerous domain of samsara, where, yes, we're going to die, where everything we love will be taken away. I mean, no wonder we're suffering. As long as we have that as our fundamental position towards this life. And so there, it's understandable that we flip back and forth from wanting something that's better, more stable, more safe, to wanting to just be done with it all, right? Whichever way we go, it's from the sense of self, and it's to deal with a completely unreliable world where everything is conditioned, which means those conditions end and it falls apart. So it's when we start to understand the Dhamma, or it's more than understanding intellectually, but start to sense it from our own experience, direct experience, this touching, then it's like, oh, there's joy that arises, there's relief, real happiness, inspiration to continue to move in that slanting, sloping, inclining towards Nibbana, that continuation of developing our sila, our samadhi, our panya. And then we stop moving towards what we're craving. We stop really thinking that's the goal, to get what we want, to make the situation the way we want, to try to change other people around us to be what we want. We stop moving in the other direction towards getting rid of, annihilation, because neither of those are satisfying in the end. It's not going to really bring us the security, the safety, the stability, because there's always that personal identity involved that really is the suffering, has suffering wrapped up in it. Anything else, Mabel?
It's good, thank you. I appreciate your answer, thank you.
Yeah, appreciate your question. Should we go on?
Okay. Uttanavato satimato suci kammassa nisammakarino sanyatassa cha dhamma jivino appamattasya sabhivaddhati.
Ever grows the glory of one who is energetic, mindful, and pure in conduct, discerning and self-controlled, righteous and heedful. Well, that's a mouthful,
The glory.
The glory. The glory.
The glory of God.
I mean, if we're not careful, we can just think, yeah, this is what we all know how we should be. So I think I can appreciate the kind of celebration of, how beneficial it is to move in that direction of having the energy and the mindfulness, developing our moral virtue and so forth. So I'm going to just take that as encouragement rather than you should be better or this is what you should be doing, because I don't think that's very helpful. Yeah, Stephen?
I heard a commentary one time about the Dhammapada, because a lot of times I have many different translations, and I read it, a lot of it does just sound like, be good, be nice, don't be bad, be gentle, and, so sometimes I say, well, how profound is this? And then one, I think it was a translator, just said, yeah, but try to do that 24/7, every day of the year, for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And it just shows really how profound what the Dhammapada asks of us in many ways.
And the key is, but it's not me as an individual personality that's going to be like this. Mm-hmm. Because that personality is not perfectible. Mm-hmm. it's like to recognize that this is all impermanent. My personality, my likes and dislikes, my skills, I mean, they're starting to crumble. I mean, I'm 71, you know, I can see it, the slippage, you know, it's like, but it's like the personality, no matter how young and strong and smart and clear and wise and whatever, as a personality, it's never going to be perfected. That nothing impermanent can be perfected, because it's always changing. And it's always going to be changing. So what is it that's like this? This is the gone beyond the personality. Because that touch of the deathless, that's totally about our not being an individual self.
That's a little tricky, hard. And by that I mean, as an unenlightened being, I have to make some striving, maybe not toward perfection. I like that word, impeccability. But I have to make some striving to do that. But that's still coming from that self place, that I have to.
Yeah.
Now, so that's where so that's the place it originates. And of course, if I keep practicing, that self place gets, thinner. So, do you know what I'm saying, though? I'm saying we start from this place that cannot be perfect, but we're kind of aiming, maybe not for, aiming to be free, and trust that we will be caught up in dropping that self place, so that the momentum of joy and freedom takes over.
So your point is really good. It's not like we say, well, then I'm not going to try to be better. No, that's not the approach. It's like we do see our mistakes and learn from them. You know, we can see the improvements in our life if we're kind, if we're generous, etc., etc. Of course, we keep moving in that direction. But if we're paying attention, then we'll know when the efforts to make this personality perfect start to kind of turn on itself. You know, it's like we have to, I don't know, like starting a sentence that way. It's like if we are paying attention to it with an openness to our thought processes, our feelings, our behaviors, if we're observing that, and we see when the patterns of the mind begin to confine us or pull us down in a way that is self-defeating. That's kind of a funny word, because I don't mean but bringing things going in the wrong direction, you might say.
Not forward leading.
Yeah, not forward leading. And this can really happen to people in the holy life, because sometimes people, after some years of being a monastic, they may get the idea that they're not really making progress and feel really discouraged, and sometimes they leave the robes on account of it. And it's like, oh, what if we can observe this and really work with those patterns of mind that tell us that pushing harder, being better, taking it to perfection is going to be the answer, and realizing it's not the answer.
Yes, I know it. So
and you're right, there is a trust, there is a faith that develops that takes us beyond that sense of self.
Yeah.
But the reflection on what is it really that I think I am? Do I really identify with this body as me? Do I really identify with these qualities I have? Or are these qualities that I'm developing as generosity and more, moral virtue and more kindness, compassion, etc.? Are those like they're not really a personal quality. It's more like moving into this broader, impersonal space. Like any of these realizations, like stream entry, for example, it's not personal. If somebody, I'm a stream introvert, you know they're not. It's not where it comes from. It's like, that's not what's going to be coming up. It's more like the awe of the process that brings this incredible relief and awakening. And so there's joy, there's humility, and yeah, it works. So there is this trust that this is where it's leading. The inclining, the slanting, the sloping to Nibbana is really happening because we are gradually, gently keeping ourselves on that path. That's what I think.
So I wonder if part of what is a little confusing to me, and like when Stephen was saying, but is it almost like saying that maybe we're supposed to be aspiring to be all these good qualities 24/7, which to me sounds like too goal-oriented. But I wonder if the English language is already kind of confusing the translation, because the word self-controlled, I mean, there's a self there and then there's controlling. And it seems like both those words and what they mean in English are not really pointing accurately to what you're talking about or what is being referred to.
It should be dispassionate, probably.
Yeah, I think it's just a bit kind of archaic, this kind of language. The same as is glory. I mean, it's a bit kind of weird in a way because it is uttana vato. Basically, uttana means to stand up, to stand firmly, or to emerge, and then it can mean energy or resolve. It's like one is like energized, and then you stand upright. Yeah. So it's not glory like something like that. Yeah. And vat, it just basically means being endowed with or being possessed with the preceding term. So uttana plus vat basically means one who is endowed with uttana in this case. Yeah, uttana, yeah. It can be uttana or uttana. And it means, energy or resolve for the practice. It's kind of you stand up. It's also the word which is used in later tradition mostly for like the emergence from certain kind of jhana states, for example. Like uttana is the emergence from a state, so it's kind of like up, coming, yeah.
So what is the soul?
Are these the 7? What do you call it? The 7 of mindfulness?
I want to know about that word. The word that's translated as self-controlled.
What are the 7? What's it called?
You mean the 7 awakening factors?
Yeah. Are these the 7 awakening factors?
No, only sati is the awakening factor.
Oh, okay.
The mindfulness awakening factor. But
Dhammena.
So if the energetic is different than like Surya energy.
Yeah, is it Virya?
It's like in verse. It's not that one word must necessarily mean something else. Sometimes, they just use different terms because of the verse or, because it's poetry, but it's not that kind of being up, it's so essentially different from other forms of energy. It's a bit more kind of fluid, the thing. But I really don't know what's being translated
Sanyatasa.
as. Oh, so okay. Sanyatasa, self-controlled. Sanyata.
Yeah, and they have yours restrained.
But do you think it's like dispassionate, like that sense of not being caught up in the quote, the passions of, all the stimulation? Do you think that's what it means?
Well, if we're talking about this word, it's the alternative in the English in the dictionary is restrained. rather than self-controlled. But this is a really good point because our language is also imperfect. Every language, words, they're only an approximation of what we experience and feel. We can't really describe it fully, right? And words are also, Ajahn Sumedho talks about, words are also sankharas. So again, it's something we acquire a language. We don't have it immediately. It's not part of our true nature or fundamental nature, right? So we're trying, with this. But then recognizing how much of a part our conditioning plays. The language we have, like if I grew up in Sri Lanka, it would have so much Dhamma in the language. Even Thailand is like, I'm told by Ajahn Pasano 30% of it's Dhamma word and Pali, and so, a language that has more, you can tell all of us probably more about this, but from what I understand, as language develops, it develops out of a certain culture, a certain society, and what that society is focused on is what you're going to have, more nuanced expressions for. And, if it's a spiritual-based society, like in India, these languages like Pali and Sanskrit have more specificity around, how you express spiritual experience than English. I think English must have been developed to do business and, technology and such, it's like more like that.
There's a Christian overlay too in the English.
Yes, very much so. And in our conditioning, and a lot of times when we overlay the sort of punitive or the driven, because our culture, we're very driven. Sometimes you see people who are conditioned differently in other cultures. They have a very different kind of approach to things. So it's really useful to reflect on that.
Yeah, like for example, this righteous would be Dhamma, I think it's Dhammajivi, which basically means, one who lives based on Dhamma, or one who has Dhamma as their livelihood, could be like that, and then it's rendered as righteous here. So on this idea that Dhamma is about righteous, like, because it's the law, is the norm. So one is like, one who is based on the Dhamma then becomes righteous. So I think, it's just like a little bit archaic, the whole language. That's what it is.
Well, it doesn't mean like living by the precepts, ethical.
I think it's Dhamma in a general sense, like the teachings, and of course putting the teachings into practice.
Venerable, what do you think of leaving some of the Pali untranslated, like Dhamma?
Yeah.
Because I get a totally different sense if I just read this with Dhamma in it. To live by the Dhamma, that's inspiring to me. To be righteous, it's like, oh,
yeah, it's a bit
calls up all kinds of weird things.
Yeah, I think I don't know, it's a bit, maybe like we need to strike a balance in the sense that, I do believe that, everything can be translated because it's been translated into all kinds of languages, in this, so, like into Tibetan, Chinese, Thai, Sinhala, etc. So I don't think that it's untranslatable, so to say, and I don't think that you need to know Pali to understand, to have direct contact with the Buddha's teachings. That being said, for keywords, like, dukkha, I am absolutely, I'm willing and unable to translate it, for example, because it's not suffering, there is like the jhanas experiences are also dukkha, but they're present, but they're unsatisfactory. So, you don't have the same word that works for every, for every occurrence. And other words, Dhamma, Nibbana, it brings too much. It brings too many problems, more problems than it solves. But I think, more than etymology or like the origin of the word or the literal meaning of the word, I think whether we translate a word or we don't translate it, it's important to understand the contextual usage. So it's not so much the meaning of the word, but the usage of this word in context. So we may not translate it, but understand the context, or we may accept like an unsatisfactory dukkha full translation, but understand the usage in context. So yeah, I think it's kind of maybe midway.
I think that has to do also that there has to be a concurrence of reading and practice, because the true meaning of the words comes from experiencing it.
Yeah.
So as you keep practicing, the words, whether it's in English or in Pali, I like the Pali too, but it's the experience, it's connecting with how I know what it means is because I know what it feels like.
Yeah, but, careful there, because, experience is
Yeah.
not the criterion for truth. So what I mean, is like, I think we do have the duty to clarify the framework. So, I mean, the responsibility also to clarify. So that definitely means something and they don't mean something else. I mean, there can be ambivalence, but, I mean, there is like, there is a way to come at least as close as possible to the intended meaning. And then, I mean, experience could be delusional.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that experience is like necessarily, of course, I mean, in most cases this come, I mean, one brings it home, I mean, with the practice, but I also think it's very dangerous to kind of put our own subjective understanding as a kind of an arbiter of meaning, with this kind of texts which are so far away also from our context. So, it's like, I mean, I wouldn't appeal to experience before having bothered to understand what this meant in the ancient Indian context, and done all my homework. So, yeah, I think as Westerners, there is this tendency a bit to kind of put subjective experience above other criteria of authority, and is a bit dangerous. I mean, I'm not saying that one has to be a traditionalist, and it's not about that, but I think we have to be a bit careful, because also, I mean, the Buddha himself, I mean, has pointed out that experience is, not trustworthy. I mean, that's what the Dhamma is about. It is telling you, I mean, your ordinary experience of things is not trustworthy. Yeah.
So could I follow up on that? So sometimes I begin to feel something in my practice, and the only word that satisfies me is the Pali. Because at some point, it's just like the English is not covering the fullness of this thing they're trying to communicate, like anatta or dukkha.
Yes.
It's just so much bigger. And so based on my experience, I just start to feel like the English language is simply completely inadequate to really convey the breadth and depth of what some of these words mean in terms of our experience. So
yeah, but I mean, I am
that?
with you. I mean, I also don't go through, English or other European languages for this. But that being said, I also think it's a matter of our relationship to a certain language. So it's not that Pali is inherently superior to any other, like natural language or literature. And the Buddha didn't speak Pali, by the way. So, and also, there are like, so then the thing is also, this is one version, this same verse, could be a little bit different in parallel versions in Sanskrit or in the underlying text. The underlying index text on which the Tibetan or Chinese translations or other languages translations were based. So this is not the Buddha's word as such. I mean, the Buddha didn't say this, exactly. So we have to also to be careful, not to cling to this kind of words as if this was like, the word of the Lord or something like that. I mean, I'm not saying that the carrier are doing this, but it's kind of also, I think, important to have some kind of understanding that this is also conditioned, historically, conditions, and so there is no, I mean, yeah, the Pali commentaries, they think that Pali is the primordial language, but
the one all babies would speak if they weren't given any other language.
Yeah. So, but that's a different thing. I mean, that's a Theravada position, that's the thing. So, yeah.
So I always really appreciate the teachers, because I always say you're teaching something that can't be taught. So I think maybe that's why really there is no language really that can convey this experience.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's just like pointing to something, it's a draft. I mean, like a raft, sorry, not a draft. I mean, a
draft of a raft?
Yeah, it's also like a sketch, like a draft, but anyway, yeah, but it's also, it's just pointing to something. And it's not that, it's kind of, I mean, and this is also very different from other ancient Indian traditions in which, the sound or words, they had inherent, spiritual potency, like with the Vedas or, other Indian traditions. So it's a very different, there is a very relativistic understanding of language. Like even in the sutras, there is one Majjhima Nikaya, or, this object is called like this, and is also called like that by others, and like that in a different kind of regional language. So there is a clear understanding that language is conventional. So this is, I think, important. I mean, as much as, I am absolutely with you, that I'm Pali is very close to my heart, but also, yeah.
This is I think this conversation is really valuable, and I think what's coming through, I think, is there's this bringing together of these different pieces of the practice and development. So I really liked what you said, Venerable, about our experience isn't so necessarily trustworthy. And we can see that, there are lots of, well-practiced practitioners who tell stories about times when they thought they had become enlightened, and then they realized later.
There was one teacher in Sri Lanka. He was very fun. He passed away last December. He said, when I was an arahant, and then another time when I was an anagamin, like that.
Yeah. There's that, and so it's like, and I think there's a kind of wise interleaving, like Ajahn Chah, said to people who studied a lot, don't take your books into meditation with you, you won't get anywhere. Because if you go with a preformed idea, I think he's saying that you can't really get beyond it, in a sense, if that's what's, holding your perception kind of in track. If we don't learn and study and have the framework, then we're really adrift too. So the Buddha talked about the importance of learning and being learned, and the importance of the wisdom and all of these different components. So when Ajahn Chah, if you read his biography, Stillness Flowing, then you see this one point where he had this very profound experience in meditation, and it really changed his way of seeing everything. And he doesn't declare what that was, but at some point Ajahn Jayasaro, the author of the book, speculates about when Ajahn Chah might have experienced stream entry, and they thought maybe, because Ajahn Chah never talked about that in his life. He didn't say, oh, this was that and that was that. He wanted, because that is so much a kind of statement of personality, personal attainment, which is not how it works, right? But he said that Ajahn Chah then observed his own mind and checked for 3 years. He's watching his mind to see if it actually demonstrates having the fruits, the complete faith, the letting go of the adherence to rites and rituals, which has taken on a whole new meaning for me listening to Ajahn Sumedho talk about that as social conditioning, social and cultural conditioning, which I think is brilliant because it broadens it so much for me, and any identity view. So it's like, yes, there's experience there, yes, there's learning, yes, there's kind of looking at them like kind of together, and then there's the ongoing reflection on what is my mind doing, and the incredible dedication to truthfulness, that we have to really be willing to see what's there and not what we want to see to gratify the self.
So I have another, I'm trying not to talk a lot. What about these Kruba Ajahns? You know,
Yeah.
Ajahn Mun and all. They just like walk off into the forest. They don't really have teachers.
Oh, they do.
Yeah,
They
like
do.
Ajahn Mun, the.
They have
You know.
teachers, and I can't tell you offhand
I
what
mean, I
Ajahn
guess
Mun's,
yeah.
but there's a lot of, like Ajahn Chah did all of the scholastic study and everything in the monastery before he ever, really picked up the forest tradition, and there's quite a lot of learning. And they're growing up in a culture where they're kind of in the soup of it a lot of times, not everywhere in Thailand, but, they're learning from monks. And there's also who knows how many past lives this person was a monk. But I think to really, a lot of the time, the stories where the person comes to the Buddha and he gives them one talk and then they enter the stream, and then there's but there's probably a fair bit more going on. I think. Is that what you were wondering about?
Because, yes, like Ajahn Mun and Ajahn Lee and, the old, that first generation of Thai forest. It's like, it's not that they didn't work hard. I'm not suggesting that. But it feels very solitary from their from their biographies.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it is. I think it is solitary in a way, because the language is not conventional.
The language is conventional. What do you mean?
Well, I heard you say that language is conventional. Is of the conventional world that we live in. We need a language, etc. But I think that the non-conventional language would be something like what Elizabeth is referring to, which is renunciation. It's a lot of renunciation.
Right.
In that you strip away the worldly things and get a chance to not be disrupted by the worldly things if you take renunciation. And oftentimes language is through action. It's not words.
And I think it depends on how we're using the concept of language. How we're using the concept of language. If we're talking about a language which involves, the words that we use in a grammar that expresses something, it's always pointing at something, and then we're bringing that, the view of that relative to direct experience, and we need both. The understanding of concepts and framework of the Dhamma. But just, the best example of what you're describing is the Buddha himself, right? Where he sort of discovered the Dhamma without someone pointing the way to him.
Right. Wasn't there some part of his story where he refers back to the fact where, as a young person, he referred to his father in the field?
Well, he was referring to an experience he had as a child.
Yes.
His father was in the field, but his experience as a child at that point brought up.
But anyway, if the father wasn't a farmer, it was like a ceremonial kind of thing that was happening at that time. So just to clarify, because it came up in one kind of in another conversation. Because I think it's not that the father was like a farmer and was farming. Right. It was like a sort of agricultural ceremony going on. Yeah.
As a leader of the.
But the reference was to what he was referring to, what the Buddha was referring to, as that child.
But he didn't awaken. He didn't awaken at that time, right? I mean, that memory is just about. I mean, it's framed. So actually is framed in terms of, at that time I had a wholesome type of pleasure, and then I realized this wholesome type of mental pleasure is not to be shunned away, etc. But nothing happened at that time. There was no awakening, etc. It's just like the post factum, like in hindsight reflection over, having been free to access this wholesome mental pleasure that then is reoriented, but after, having gone through a lot more after that. So just I want to say that, it's not that this, thing is awakening. I mean, I'm not saying you're saying this, but, there is also, I think sometimes this understanding that it's all about, simplifying or non-verbal. But that happens after you have, I am a disciple of the Buddha. I'm not my own disciple of my own mind state, so I need to know what the Buddha taught. If I don't know what the Buddha taught, I am just doing my own kind of path, which is legitimate. I think it's totally legitimate, but I'm not, so to say, it's a different path, So it's a totally different path, the path of my own experience or my own experience framed by the Buddha's teachings. It's a totally different kind of attitude to spiritual practice, I think.
And I'm not sure that's where you were
going. No, just saying it in general.
Yeah.
But I think that there is a component to that. There is in the human being, their own path, and like myself, I've incorporated many paths, etc. And also the culture that I came from. I look at these words. I have a different meaning because of a different culture. Yeah. But I think that there is what I heard was the language is really used for the conventional world that I live in. I need it to function.
But actually, what's very interesting is that this exactly this word pusati, passa. So you touch nibbana, which is the highest supramundane reality or truth, and it is exactly the same experiential languaging used for the six senses, mundane, very mundane, is used. Yeah. So this is because basically, with later tradition, you have a whole kind of cathedral, built around, awakened states and classifications, etc. But in the early texts, this language is just like a raft to cross over. So there is no. On the one hand, there is no new language, not a lot of new language and new descriptions or to point to this awakened experience. But on the other hand, there is no conflict with conventional language. So in other words, there is no conventional against non-conventional reality in early Buddhism. This comes with later tradition, because the Buddha has solved any conflict with conventional reality, so he doesn't bother. He can use conventional language without having to, reinvent the wheel. So he's using just very normal kind of ways of pointing to that, because unlike the worldling, like the unawakened person who gets into conflict with conventionality, he doesn't. So this is actually the big difference, is this lack of conflict with conventional language and language in general.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. How's our timing? Oh, we're good. Yeah. Okay, let's
move on.
Yeah, let's go to the next one. 25.
Uttanena pamadena sanyamena damena cha dipam kairata medavi yammogona bhikirati.
By effort and heedfulness, discipline and self-mastery, let the wise one make for themselves an island which no flood can overwhelm. Self-explanatory? Pretty much, huh?
Yeah.
So let's do the next one.
Pamadam manu yunjanti Pamadam manu yunjanti baladu medino jana appamadam cha medavi dhanam sittham varakkati.
The foolish and ignorant indulge in heedlessness, but the wise one guards heedfulness as their best treasure. It's important, guys.
Well, you have a translation that says their best treasure. I've still got the.
I put that in myself.
Oh, you did? Oh.
Because we have problems with language. So
it's not just for the he and the him.
Right. Well, thank you for doing that.
Ayya?
Yeah.
I took a little peek at another translation that I enjoy. Instead of using heedlessness, they use diligence.
Yeah.
And instead of heedlessness, they use negligence.
Diligence and negligence. So if we do that here, the foolish and ignorant indulge in negligence, but the wise one guards diligence as their best treasure.
This says keeps diligence. That's their best treasure.
They may not seem as absolute.
Yeah.
They seem to point. She's talking about how language points.
And it's really useful to use this kind of thing in reflection. Like, how does that strike me? You know, that's really the important part. And getting used to taking that position of a witness to your experience, or witnessing what arises, and seeing it for what it is. You know, sankharas, product of conditioning, being able to not take it so personally or seriously. I think that's really useful. I often look at multiple translations of things to really get a sense of the range that translators are tapping into. I like looking at the dictionary definitions for the specific words to see, what, it's like, how do you learn language as a child? You hear the word in different contexts. And as Venerable Dhammadina was talking about, the context is so important. And sometimes I feel like I can get a sense of the Buddha's attitude when he's speaking. Like sometimes you can really feel the kindness and the patience, and especially when he's talking to certain people, and you kind of get that feeling, because how we express ourselves really has an impact on what the words mean and how they're heard and experienced.
Just raised one more question. Acharya, Buddha Kahita, is he Sri Lankan? Is he Japanese?
Oh, yes. Acharya Buddharakkhita is Sri Lankan.
Sri Lankan.
Yeah.
So his English is Sri Lankan English.
Yeah, again, like Venerable Dhammadina was saying, it's a little bit archaic.
Yeah.
It's a little bit, lofty in a certain way, maybe. Yeah.
But I think it's also now quite old. I don't know when it was first published. I have no idea really, but it's also like...
Right, we might see more. This particular one is 2007.
Yeah, probably earlier than that, I'm not sure.
I think so.
Yeah.
We might see more in in yours, Carrie, do you see where?
Malaysia.
The earliest.
I'm not even seeing a copyright. Well, there is no copyright.
Oh, the first BPS Pariyatti edition was in 2019. Oh, well, that's recent.
Present translation was originally made in the late 1950s.
There you go.
The late 1950s. Okay.
Yeah.
75 years.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, negligence seems more contemporary to me. Heedlessness sounds like something from the Bible.
Exactly. Well, this is why people go, whoa, I don't know. Don't really want to deal with this word. Yeah, that's right. So, the late 1950s.
Tanya?
I have a question, but before that, just to say that my first teacher in Sri Lanka was Godwin, who Dhammadina knew also. So he was trained, he studied at Oxford and then went back to Sri Lanka. So his English was influenced by studying at Oxford. I'm still kind of stuck on the word joy, and I'm seeing now that, because it's the only time that word is enjoy is used in this whole chapter, and wondering, because you said you were talking about mudita and other words for joy, how does that relate to the joy or happiness in the fourth factor of enlightenment?
Fourth factor of enlightenment?
Yeah. Isn't that happiness?
I mean piti samvojjhanga?
Oh, you mean the yeah.
Is it a mudita kind of thing, or is it more? Isn't it more of a sukha sort of in the factors of enlightenment?
PT.
Oh, it's PT.
Yeah. So Pamoja, PT, Sukha, different sort of facets maybe, or different kinds of joy and happiness and pleasure, pleasant feeling. Yeah.
We run into a problem with that in English too, because joy, it's like, oh yeah, I know all this ebullient stuff in English, and I think maybe I'm not sure where something I was listening to where that sense of the joy is actually like it's like a calmness, it's not all this like excitement stuff. It's actually a calmness.
It can be, and I think Bhante Nalio talks a fair bit about this as he talks about Satipatthana and maybe Anapanasati, where you're experiencing PT, in the second tetrad, and to recognize that there is a range. Now, when you start to relax and let go, those pleasant feelings that are arising, they can become quite strong, but they can also be quite subtle. And I still think of them as joy. And mudita, I like the translation rejoicing. Sometimes I think that's suitable to the context.
I think this is one of those cases actually when experience has a place has a role to play, because these are not descriptions, these are like prescriptions in this instruction. So it's saying at that point you have joy, but it doesn't say exactly how this joy is felt. So it's for you to know how joy or happiness or whatever that is, and it's also part of mindfulness practice to somehow know for yourself, this is what it is for me, this is how it feels like. So to have this extra like knowledge about or cognition over your own practice.
Should we go on to the next one?
So ma pamada manuyunjeta ma kamarati santavam appamatto hi jayanto pappoti vipulam sukham.
Do not give way to negligence. Do not indulge in sensual pleasures. Only the diligent and meditative attain great happiness. So sukha there is the happiness. So don't go down that road of negligence.
Well, that's interesting reading it in the Pali, because I've read the Dhammapada before in English, but in this case, the fact that they're talking about sukha specifically for happiness, it makes more sense to me, because the don't indulge in sensual pleasures is something that you would an injunction to make if you're trying to gain spiritual happiness, and sukha kind of communicates that more like a happiness you would gain in like jhana or something. I mean, you can there are forms of happiness you can get by indulging in sensual pleasures, but this kind of makes it more clear what sort of happiness we're talking about.
Yes, definitely. Like, don't get distracted by the kinds of happiness that aren't going to last and aren't really going to be satisfying. I mean, not to say that the sukha lasts. It's more like it's part of the path going in the direction of freedom. Whereas essential pleasures are not going in the direction of freedom. They're still convincing us that it's worth indulging and being entangled in the world of sankharas, of those things that are conditioned and falling apart.
Yeah, and it also kills you because Mara is actually the one who kills you, or so and that's why it's also about being not deathless, because actually the Mara is the celestial presiding over the sensual sphere, is also like killing you through sensual pleasures. So sensual pleasures lead you to the non-deathless. It's also, I think, this is kind of the underlying kind of thing that is coming through here.
Dead already.
That's a hard. I'm really very stuck on that. I mean,
you should talk to my granddaughter, because teenager, she said when they went back to school after COVID, and both my grandchildren, my granddaughter was probably 15 at the time, and my grandson maybe 12 or 13, and they were noticing the awkwardness among all their classmates. It's really kind of hard to get into like relating to each other again after that long break when everybody's developing so much and they come back like totally different people, right?
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting experience. And my granddaughter at one point said, you just look at people, like look down the hall, and it just seems like they're dead inside.
Wow.
How
old is she?
She was probably about 15 when she said that. And it's like, so like maybe so constricted because of the awkwardness and the needing to like relearn how to be social with each other. But that idea of being dead inside, like you go down the road of sensual pleasures. How long does it take before you feel dead inside?
Yeah, but that's where I'm stuck, is before the dead inside.
When it's really fun?
Yes. Yes. That's where I'm stuck.
Thing. Oh.
That's, even though I know where it's going, I know it's not lasting, but it's like, just a brief moment of relief.
And that's the problem, because you need relief,
Yeah.
That's exactly the problem, because you consume it, so to say, and then you don't have it, and then you need it, and then you get it, and then you get the relief from the lack, That's the problem. That's why it's painful in the end.
Yes.
Because you need relief from an unpleasant state.
Yes.
Because you depend, it's kind of, there is dependency there.
Yes, but I'm just like...
No, I know.
Is it self-compassion? Are you giving yourself self-compassion?
Sometimes.
When you do those things, that's okay.
I think for me, I was starting to notice the dukkha even in the height of the sensual pleasure. I mean, it's like there's a nervousness, or there was something unpleasant about it underneath. And then in contrast to what it feels like to genuinely give something to someone. Where there's none of that dukkha.
Yeah, there's that anxiety of the loss.
Yeah, you're afraid of losing it. I found it most intense when you're madly in love with someone and they seem to like you, and then you get so worried that it's not going to go right. See? It's like, anyway.
Yeah, there's so much lack of freedom, because it's like you depend on having, like this need satisfied. And it's like, you're happy if you get satisfied, and then you're upset if you don't get satisfied. So I just feel it's a bit I don't want to give my freedom away, so it's kind of this kind of constant reification, as if like the object were able to make you happy. I mean, I want to make myself happy or unhappy if I have to, but somehow I really find very, very painful that predicament of this dependency on an object to kind of, satisfy. And what if you cannot I mean, okay, there is war, you can't get chocolate, so are you going to be unhappy during war? I mean, and no, this is a fact,
Yeah, you're
so
this is exactly...
This is the problem, it's kind of...
You're painting it very clearly, that's exactly... But I got to tell you, in the moment, it's like, oh yeah, Even though it lasts a minute, it's not calming.
Of course.
It's just like, okay.
But you see that relief, that okay, so our bound, the same relief from not having the need, because that in momentary relief is just from having the need satisfied. And then a second later is no longer satisfied and a new need arises. So that satisfaction comes from feeling fulfilled. So you could be fulfilled in a way which is not contingent upon having the need satisfied, but through lack of need. So that would be actually safer. Do you know what I'm?
I totally know, and that's why I practice.
Yes.
I get what you're saying. I'm just like, I'm just stuck.
But it's just like a little change of perspective,
Yeah.
If you stay with that kind of sense of satisfaction you get, when you actually do satisfy the sensual urge, and you really feel it, you maybe you will not be able to feel that it's so satisfactory. If you really make a point of of knowing, or this is like, okay, now I intentionally satisfy my sensual need, and now does it feel? So I think it is different. I mean, I'm not advocating renunciation or anything like that, but it's just about freedom, because you don't want to depend on something, to be okay.
Especially when it doesn't provide that. I get the picture.
It seems like there's also like a mirror to that, in that you could say like, okay, I'm really enjoying this, and really reflecting on how little it is that you really need to be satisfied. Like, I mean, on one hand, like, every morning I wake up and I look forward to my my pot of tea, which has caffeine and which tastes good. And so part of that is a sensual pleasure, and then the other part is like, well, actually, this is relatively little that I'm actually not really doing a whole lot right now. I'm not saying like I need to like go out and go to the nightclub at 8 a.m. I mean, I just need this. And it's kind of like a relatively simple gratitude too. And that's at least I feel like that's at least preferable to, oh, I'm drinking this, but I need more.
Upgrading your sensual pleasures.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, if only I had a croissant as well. But,
well, I
guess I'd be happy with what I have.
I did have a chocolate.
You're going downhill fast.
But can we define indulge? Because how does one make that determination? It can be very relative, and then
So making the determination, which can be very relative, about indulging or not indulging.
How do we define indulgence? Because we have an idea in terms of tangible food.
Right. What indulgence is with
someone
food.
Really indulging versus just nourishing themselves. There's a clear tangible difference.
Yeah.
But how do you do that in the other realm?
In the other realm, like
real central realm. What do you?
I'm not sure.
Often not in public, how do we define that?
You mean like with sexuality,
Yes.
So just to repeat, because I doubt it could be heard back there, the question is, okay, with eating, you can feel the difference between eating something for the sensual pleasure of it and eating it for the health of the body. But how do you discern that when, say, you're really into some strong sensual experience like sex? And I think it does come back to awareness of our experience and how integrated it is. So when I say that about being integrated, I'm thinking about, it's not just the physical urge, but it's also the caring and the intimacy that's there, that this person cares about you, that you care about them. It's not just for that physical or emotional, whatever whatever, all of the pieces that get engaged in just merely having sex. And to begin to really observe what our experience is. Like when I was a lay person and in a committed relationship, at one point as a practitioner, I had the experience that the height of orgasm was not that much different from getting my teeth drilled.
Wow.
Wildly pleasant or wildly painful, but the same, just sensation.
Wow.
Whoa! And no Novocaine. I never did that. So it's, I mean, and not that I never, for decades, didn't do anything, the pain killing part. So you could really experience the sensation. But when you start to really like observe our experience, really look at it and see what's there, what's really there. And so much of what we experience and seek and then feel disappointed about or bereft over the loss of is about our conditioning. We're told this is what we should want, this is what we need, and of course the procreative apparatus of the human form is we're kind of made to continue the species. But it's wonderful sometimes to have a family and raise young people and give a very big part of your life to that and so on. This is not to diminish that in any way, but to recognize that the human form is and every living being in this world is about grasping, fulfilling need, fulfilling desire. It's all about, it's food, it's everything, like we're constantly craving. I mean, you look at animals, they can't survive without consuming other animals or whatever. And it's like to see that this is a grasping realm, and that's the whole apparatus we take on when we come into this life, and to recognize that it doesn't bring ultimate happiness, and that we actually can go beyond it. And how amazing it is that we have that opportunity, and it's through the present moment direct experience of what is beyond the craving and clinging. Well, on that happy note, try it without Novocaine.
Do you know that joke about the yogi who had to get the work done without any painkillers? He wanted to transcend dental medication.
He wanted to transcend dental medication.
Transcendental medication.
Transcendental medication. That's cute. Yeah, so I think that's it for today. Thank you all. So we left it at 27. So we'll start on 28 next time.